that's the whole comfort at this point.
Yes. It's funny because I'm coming from the same position, sort of. I have a small media company, a small startup, and we have 2 employees, and we take interns on a regular basis from UBC and we have contract workers that we don't pay enough, and it sucks. And so, what is your? This is sort of a hard question, but it's like, what's your advice to us? Like, I don't want to perpetuate this system. I agree with you that it's broken. And I don't want to exploit our friends that we're hiring either. So what is a good way for someone like us to sort of like chart this new way, or at least start to think about how we might do that?
I don't want to tell you how to run the business, but I think that maybe one issue that we could discuss here is the fact that I think all of us need to begin to advocate for a social safety net which is adequate to the times. I mean, employers need to hire and fire people quickly. We live in an economy where decisions need to be made very on the spur of the moment. We need to be flexible, etc. Fine. But I think we need a social safety net which is adequate for that. If workers are going to be forced to live in a world where they can be hired or fired at will, where they can be used like Kleenex, then at this point we need a form of welfare which is going to be there for them during those periods where they're not in work. And I think this is one of the, again, I don't want to tell you how to run the business, that's your decision. But I think at a policy level, we need to begin to advocate for a social safety net which can deal with this situation.
In the old days, it was called unemployment insurance. If I can just ask a couple of questions about your media startup, what sort of work are you doing? What sort of clients do you have? Without giving away any secrets.
We produce media and events for the purposes of reimagining civic engagement amongst Generation Y. Our company is called Gen Y Media. So we partner with nonprofit organizations or government to produce media and events that are young audience.
Very cool. In the old days, last century, that's my experience. I'm an analog guy, so I apologize for that. There was always porn. Not necessarily pornography. There was, although there is that. I mean, for small startups, you need a cash cow. And whether it's forest porn, poverty porn, or porn, you know, you need that cash cow in order to get your cash flow going. You know, and I mean, my experience with the startup was back in that time where, you know, when the conversation, as I said, was just starting to change. And so that's my experience with it. I think the work you're doing is really cool. I think that now, this century, that there's more hope within the co-op model, looking at that sort of thing and building those sorts of co-ops. Looking to, again, going back to the events of a year ago, looking back to the Occupy movement and that kind of cooperation. You're seeing the same sort of thing. And just as a point of interest, I think you're seeing the same sort of thing in Manhattan now, in the aftermath of Sandy. Local people banding together to help each other out, you know. And government, yeah, they can distribute this, that, or the other thing, but it's really the people who are working together. And I think that's now where the secret to success may lie. And it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, you know, Valerie, I feel for you. I wish there was, you know, some way that we could wave a magic wand and change the employment law. That's not going to happen. But collectively, together, who knows, 5 to 10 years, it may happen. You look back 10 years at where we were and look at it now, I mean, it's been a sea change. It really has. And there's a recognition when ENDA and people like me talk about an economic model that has failed. And everybody nods their head and goes, yeah, that's right. Well, 10 years ago, you were in for a fist fight if you said something like that. Right? So it'll come with time. But that may be where you're at, otherwise.
It sounds to me like you're already doing it, right? You're treating these interns as they're collaborators with you in your workplace. And as long as I mean, you can't afford to pay people, but you want to give them the experience. So the challenge, I think, is to make sure that they get what you give, or you give what they get. There's an equality to the arrangement, and to ensure that when they are going off and are going to try to move to the next level, that you do whatever you can to help set them up so that they get the paid internship next, and that experience is of value. In the market. It should be a value, sometimes it's not, but it should be. So whatever you can do as an employer to help propel these new employees forward, I think, is the way to start up. As for you, come and see. I don't know your industry at all, but I'd be totally happy to sit down and try to figure out a plan or strategy, or give you some context of people who might be able to suggest some ideas.
It's just interesting because, while I agree that experience is extremely valuable, and it's going to sound very stubborn, I mean, being stubborn, but experience is not being that.
Yeah, I know.
And how are you supposed to get experience if you're in that lump, right? This is the problem that is basically screwing up our generation.
But you know what? I would push back on that a tiny bit and just say, you guys, that it's not as though this is a new problem to this generation. It's absolutely true what Enda says, that it's worse now than it's ever been. But when I was a girl, I'm 48 years old. My first jobs at the CBC, I was 22 years old. And I got a 4-day contract, and I didn't get paid. It was a 4-day sort of work for free sort of situation. And I worked and got 2 weeks under my belt, and then I got a month, and it kind of just, and it was just this constant push, and feeling like I was always sort of reaching to the next thing. Now there is no next thing to reach to, because there's not a job for you to attach yourself to, and that's the real dilemma. But it's not as though it's completely unique to this generation.
Well,
although it's much more
just
difficult.
a more prolific over-income
Yeah.
problem that's affecting a lot more people, right? And I think you're right what you're saying with having this job to look forward to. I think that in the past, you interned, you worked your way up, and there was a job to look forward to. And it's great what you're doing. A lot of programs at UBC, for example, like the Master in Architecture program, which I tried for a while and left because they were just a horrific department, so many different levels. But even like the institution that regulates professionals who come out of that program, they also don't have a great protection for their interns and new employee program, and they cut their internship program at the university level because there was no funding for it. So many programs at UBC have that they've had to cut because of funding issues. And then the other problem is also, there are schools like BCIT, for example, they have a great industry partnership for internships, but so many people come out. I know a lot of friends who are in media, involved in media, that have the experience, have had the internship, have the education, and they are still being treated like interns 4 or 5 years post these experiences and education, and that's just what's probably plummet.
I just wanted to respond very quickly. The case of architects actually quite interesting. Architects were one of our, virtually the only profession in which younger architects pushed back against a very exploitative system of internships and actually changed the labor conditions through which they are able to access their profession. I think it's a really good example of interns actually organizing and how that holds promise as far as changing the conditions and democratizing access and at least lowering the level of exploitation that happens of those who are at the bottom of the pile. And so I just wanted to say that because architects actually are a really good example of pushing back against that.
Okay, let's go to you.
I want to contradict a little bit Captain Progressive here. I'm an independent documentary filmmaker for 25 years. First of all, I've never read that book. In 25 years, I've never made anything near to $500 a day in my entire life. But that's being an independent documentary filmmaker. And over the last 20 years, it's been decimated. There used to be jobs in independent documentary in BC, and it's the Doc Organization of Canada did a study 2 years ago that statistically analyzed that the number of jobs we have in BC now have gone down by 75%. That is, the funding that BC producers get is like 25 cents on the dollar what we were making before. That means that I know producers in Vancouver, many of them are gone. Like the business is finished.
On the other hand, Toronto's growing.
Yes, because of a cut to independent documentaries, which are the independent thinkers of the media. I mean, I respect those big conglomerates that produce media for Canada, but they don't do the 2 to 3 to 4 year projects or 10-year projects that a documentary directors do, right? So I like the discussion to go back to like what happened to the independent documentary in Canada. Huge.
How is this contradicting what I said I did?
Well, you said that 10 years ago there was more work, and it was harder. It was harder for you to start. It's worse now.
That's what I said. It's way worse.
Way worse.
Okay.
Infinitely.
Yeah.
There are no jobs.
Yeah, in documentary, it's terrible.
It's gone. That's what happened was they cut down independent documentary filmmaking by 50%, and then everything else went to Toronto. Right? So they don't have an office in BC anymore for independent documentaries. CBC used to have one.
Yes, there still is a documentary unit at the CBC.
Yeah, well, I know a guy who used to work there and was fired. There really isn't. There's no office. There was an office for Global. It's gone.
Oh, well,
right? There was an
let's
office
be
for
realistic
CBC.
what they
It's
do
gone.
with this funding,
Right.
okay? They go, oh, we're going to give X, Y, or Z. You know, we want this from the regulator, so we're going to give $7 million worth of benefits to the independent documentary makers. Brother, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. David points out it never actually gets to the point, and this goes back to what Enda was saying about the failed economic model. It never actually gets down to the point of the people who actually make the stuff, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about making stuff, and it never gets there. That $7 million gets eaten up by a bunch of people who go, well, I like your script treatment, but you know, I think it needs a rewrite. And it goes around in circles, and it never gets to development, and then the money ran out. And we spent the $7 million, yeah, on my cousin's brother's girlfriend, who read the scripts. She didn't like it, so they needed rewrites. But that's what's happened over the past 25 years. And I know, because, you know, we used to do it, and, you know, I ended up in a newsroom, too, as the person over here was saying, pay the rent.
Yeah.
You know? And that's part of the challenge.
I'm making a documentary now online, more or less, for no pay. I have arts grants. The arts grants are funding my independent, hyper-local journalism. My citizen journalism is being funded by the arts grants, which are also being slashed.
Yeah.
I went to Knowledge Network to do the current project I'm doing. Didn't get funding. Went to CTV, CBC. Nobody wants to listen to subjects such as the Little Mountain Project I'm looking at. And I just recently got a lot of press last week. We actually won. One of the buildings was saved. But no national broadcaster was interested in funding that story, that long-term story, which is 4 years into production now.
I just would caution you not to say that people aren't interested. It's just that maybe there's simply no money to pay for the long-term project like that. I don't think what you and I are saying is contradictory at all. What I was saying about journalism in the public service, I think documentary journalism is absolutely necessary to our understanding the world.
But it's really independent.
It's tragic that it's
like,
been
it's
cut.
not like you know, it's supposed to be arm's length. Usually it isn't. Usually some suit at the corporation is going to try to change your story, or but even so, that's all become reality TV. Like Louise Clark, who used to be an independent producer, is now producing The Housewives of West Van, one of Canada's most talented documentary producers. That's what happened.
So the big networks like CBC and Global, they used to have, they used to fund
An office.
independent
Yeah.
documentary
Yeah.
filming.
Yeah.